You guys know me. Welcome, welcome. I'm vibrating with excitement because I love these conversations. They're my favorite. So you may notice I have a white wall behind me today. It's a blank slate. No, I'm just kidding. I've moved my studio around because I have to do a bunch of really specific lives with a white background. So we're just going to leave it like this today. But I have a special guest today. It's V is here, and she works with something called SIT. Sit with it, but it also stands for something else. Can you share a little bit more and tell us about your journey, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a really beautiful open-ended question, and I'm going to take it and run with it. So,
Awesome.
I'm V, and I'm one of the owners of Sit With It, sitwithit.co. And SIT stands for Subconscious Imprinting Technique. So, I mean, this was all derived when I was at the very beginning of my acupuncture career. And I was just finding that even though I was getting results with clients, I wanted more for them, and I could see that they wanted more. And at the root of that was a lot of emotional repression. And
Yes.
so SIG came to be through like a whole story, but the basis of it is to go to really root memories, whether they're insignificant seeming or whether they're actually like pretty big memories that people have where the emotional data wasn't resolved. And so us and our practitioners, we take people to back to that moment. We resolve the emotional data and boom, we get them out of it so that they can move forward with their life and they're not trapped in the past. So that's it in a nutshell. And
Beautiful.
it's just been a really incredible journey to watch people unfold.
Absolutely. And I'm really curious. So when you, this is going to stick because I know a lot of people will have this question. When you ask them to go back to a memory, is it one that stands out the most? Is it the one in the moment? Do you meditate on it? How do you decide which event?
Yeah, it's a really good question. With our process, what we have found is that there's this signature piece that we use. We call it a reveal process. And so our practitioners are trained through their most comfortable form of awareness. And everybody uses it differently. You and I had a previous conversation in regards to dowsing. And so some people use that. There's a lot of different variations, but we train them to be able to go to the specific moment in time that's the most relevant to their symptom that they're experiencing in the present.
Mm,
And from there, they'll get a very specific time period. And almost everybody, it's like, they're like, oh my gosh, how did you do that? How did you know that? There's this really weird memory that's coming up that I don't know why it's coming up. And so then that's what we work off of is
perfect.
basically, yeah, the entirety of the client's experience and what comes up for them. So it's not derived by us, but them.
Absolutely. And that is the most powerful healing when it's
Oh yeah.
coming through them, right? And you're facilitating. They really feel that you're holding that space and energy for them and connecting with their higher self, so to speak, to allow this information to come forward for them to unlock the key to their healing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people forget how powerful they actually are and how much awareness they actually have. You
Yeah.
know, like people know, they know that they don't want to wear certain clothes or they know that they don't want certain foods or they know that they don't want to hang out with certain people, but I think that that gets forgotten about when it comes to our own bodies and to our own experiences. It's like I always ask that question, like when did you know you didn't want to date that person? When did you know there was a red flag but you overlooked it? Like so innately, but
Yes.
what overrode it? What was
Right.
that piece? Yeah.
Right. And so I always say this stems from your brain is like a CPU and your subconscious is the programming. And your
Mm.
subconscious only knows you, and its only job is to keep you safe. So, whatever programming you got at that age, it really sticks through. And part of that programming I find is to look up to the teacher, to look up to your parents, to listen to what you're told to do, to ask, oh, can I go to the bathroom? Like,
Mm.
right? So all this conditioning that happens so that you look outside of yourself and up to somebody considered above you or beyond you, so to speak, for answers. And so we're taught to doubt ourselves. Oh no, that's just
Mm.
this. Oh no. And so then people get smaller. At least that was my experience. And I come from being a really, I say, a bit of a black sheep and a full on rebel.
A
Yeah.
little
Who
bit different in the
leans far
family?
the other way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those can be challenging when it feels like you don't fit in, but I'm not sure that you're meant to fit in at the same time. You know,
exactly.
we talk about pattern changers and that's not to say that you need to overlook and like totally drastically change everything that you've come from because there's gifts in that, but there's usually a crucial thing that needs to be shifted, right? And those little rebels, perhaps you and I. Perhaps everybody
We're
listening.
all finding each other right now.
Right? There you go. There you go. I also really like looking at Eric Erickson's model. I don't know if you're familiar, the psychosocial stages.
Yep.
And I find those fascinating when I'm working with people in their language. I'm like, oh, yes, you've gone into self-doubt versus perhaps knowing who you are. Oh, you have perhaps had some challenges figuring out what your identity is. There's confusion that's been along the way. And those happen, there's set stages throughout our lifetime. And I find those so indicative in people's language as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so let's share a little bit more how you created this program, because I know you had a bit of a self-healing journey through this.
Yeah, I mean, if we go all the way back to the beginning, so that would have been, it would have mostly started in and around 2015. So I was with my partner. I mean, I'm still with my partner, bless her. And at that time, I was a new acupuncturist. I was working out of town. She wanted to go find herself. She went to Costa Rica. And 6 days into her trip, her father took his own life. And that started the whole journey. And so when she came back, I mean, there was a lot of healing that needed to happen, but she started to develop these migraines. And it made sense, right, that they were trauma induced from her father passing. But what was going on is that, we would go to practitioner to practitioner, practitioner, and whether it was, hey, put this on the shelf, or B, go for these brain scans, or C, you just smoke a bunch of marijuana. It was like nobody ever asked her, like, what's your emotional history? How did you grow up? Is there something actually deeper going on other than these physical symptoms that are trying to be managed with medication? And I was at that time that newer acupuncturist, and I got so frustrated because I couldn't help either. And so we were all just kind of left helpless. And I remember sitting in the neurologist's office, and when there was the recommendation of marijuana, and no shade on plants and what they can do for us.
Right.
But to me, it was the last resort from this high level physician. And to me, that wasn't good enough. And so I went on a journey. I went searching and searching and searching. And I found a woman in the States talking about emotions and how that connected to the body. And I was like, whoa. And I came from a background where I could feel everything because I couldn't hear everything.
Right.
So there were not discussions about how we feel. There were not discussions about my performance. There was none of that. And so I had to feel my way through everything. So I'm very good at feeling a room, feeling people. It works great in my private practice because I know exactly where things are stuck and when they're moving. And so when that was all happening and this woman started talking about these emotions, I was opened up to this whole new world. And when we came back from some of her teachings, I looked at my partner and I said, I just want to try one thing. She was having this whole response one day and the migraine showed up and she was going to go to an appointment. She couldn't make it to the appointment. And I said, no, like, this is a really important appointment. Let's see if we can interrupt it. And it just came to me. I was like, what happened when you were 12? She told me the whole story. I saw how it overlaid into the present moment. And I said, just let me see if I can help you get it out. And within 30 minutes, her migraine went away. She never had one ever again. And so it was a moment. Yeah. We were like, if it can help that, like, what else can we do? And then it helped her sciatica pain. It helped so many areas of her life. And I was like, okay, if this worked here, let's see what happens with my clients. So I started approaching some of my clients who were fairly open-minded. They liked Reiki already. They liked the acupuncture. They liked whatever else I was open to at that time. And so it was an easy transition point to these clients. And then it just took off and I couldn't manage my schedule any longer.
Right.
And so Ocean's like, you either got to raise, she did a lot of business coaching for me. So she was like, you either got to raise your prices, so it slows the schedule down. So I raised my prices and it made it even busier, which it just really stressed me out. And she's like, hey, it's time to teach people now.
Yeah.
So we systemized it. And then we've been teaching it for the last 5 years all over the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And what type of practitioners are coming into your programs?
Yeah, great question. Everything and everyone from a stay-at-home mom to acupuncturists, massage therapists, psychologists. We had a flower farmer come through. We've got just about everybody. Coaches love it the most because they can pinpoint things even faster through like Zoom calls, for example. And then anybody else who has this desire when they're kind of in that phase where they're like 55, Women at 55 who are like, I want a career change, even though they've done no healing modality, they seem to love it too. It just overlays beautifully in a lot of different modalities. That's
Yeah.
so cool if people just boop.
They're coming in.
Popping in.
Yeah, there's one that I don't get to see as easily, but that's okay. Yeah. So, and Andrea, maybe Andrea's a good one to chat with. So Andrea, I know you've been having a bit of she's been going through nausea, and we can chat a little bit about this because I know a bit of the history. She's going through nausea and then was sick for several days. I'm like, so what was it following? And so that's somehow when I go into it, I'm like, so what was going on when this happened? So when it started.
Yeah.
And so then we go back to that. And then, okay, so where regularly in your life does this happen? So it's an opportunity for people to get to know themselves in a new way. Because in a way, what I feel you're doing a lot is being intuitive and teaching people to be more intuitive, and then using the skills like the dosing, because I go back to ages for all the time for people. I was having dinner with my girlfriend, and she's like, this is my kryptonite, this happens, and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, so what happened when you were 12?
Right.
The look on her face when her eyes got really big. So it's very profound when one can tap into the emotions, because if energy is not emotion, then it's trapped. And we were Norm and I were having a discussion the other day about cancer and how cancer's trapped energy.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so if one can release that trapped energy, right, then we can look at things in a new way. And so it's trusting your body, getting that mind, body, spirit going for self, so that you feel like, oh, I can shift my reality myself. I can control this situation. Maybe can't control others, but I can control me and what works for me. So it's very, very empowering. And that's what I love, is that it's not just about, oh, we're healing. Now we're empowering you to seek how to heal yourself. Because once you've gone through a session, you might better understand how to move through on your own a bit more, smaller situations, and then build up from there. Would that be right?
Yeah, I think that the whole point of it is to teach people like where things are coming from. They think that, I mean, I don't know if you've had this, if you're sitting across from your friends and they're like, oh my God, you're such a witch. And I'm like, Kate, no, I'm just really experienced at being able to sense where it's coming from. And you can do it too. If you're just kind of like you said, if we were taught all the way in kindergarten, all through school, I don't know how much extra help we would need at self-inner reflection. And so when we have these moments with clients, we're just showing them like these are just picture moments that you're coming back to, because some of the data, the sensory data, is just pulling you back to be revealed and to be released all over again. And I think the more people experience sessions like that, the more that they actually start to do it themselves. And that's the whole point, right? The whole point is to have that that's my, like, that if I could have a dream come true, it would be that, is that people have that deep inner reflection.
Absolutely. And to have that, I love it when somebody lights up and has an aha moment. It's like,
right?
It's just like, oh, we did it. You want to do that little dance? We did it.
I'm totally there with you, and I have some of those moments. Like, I'm just wanting to like snapshot back to you had mentioned speaking about cancer and like, things getting
Yes,
stuck,
please.
and my own journey through that, it spawned a really interesting perspective, because it was really challenging to go to and to go through, not from a physical perspective, but from a mental, emotional perspective. And when I really sat with that, I was like, I don't actually think there was any way around this. Like, I actually think that was part of my blueprint to unlock something so much deeper. And it spawned this whole thing for me when people are like, why did this happen? And I'm like, it was supposed to happen. Like, you can go back and try and figure out all the ways around it. But the point is that it's happening right now. And then this is how it changes your trajectory in the future. And so I've always had this wonder where I'm like, what's part of the blueprint and what is self-created?
That's a good question, right? We don't all get to know our blueprint because we're supposed to figure it out. And we believe, we've been chatting about this quite a bit, how we created this difference and this darkness, and everyone kills it like evil. And I'm like, but we created it. We decided to see how dark can we go and still find our way back to the light.
Mm.
And it's quite profound when you look at it that way, because if it was always bright and shiny light, well, that would be really blinding after a while, right? We need that yin and yang and that balance. And I do believe that we decided as a group to say, all right, let's see how far we can go into the darkness and find our way home. And if everyone looked at it also like if we were a compass, right? And we had a compass and we were drawing out and we threw, all right, let's go over here, right? And then can I find my way back to my center? And so
Totally.
we're all just walking each other home, but also home within ourselves. Yeah,
Mhm.
and finding that center, that where you feel whole and loved and at peace. And what does it for you for that? What floats your boat? What makes you
Yeah.
giggle with anticipation?
Right? And, like, how does that even shift over time? The things that you just found so much delight in, how much has that shifted and expanded or contracted in whatever direction it needed to go in? You know, one of my favorite things listening to some of your other episodes is the conversation of what's right and what's wrong, and it's like, that depends on anybody else's perception that's looking at it, right? And if you can be neutral at it, if you can be neutral at your own experience and just looking at it from no emotional charge whatsoever, what is that experience like?
Yeah.
To me, it's freeing. I don't know what it's like for you or anybody else.
It's freeing, and when it first started to happen, I was like, "Oh, I lost my emotions." Gone. Where did they go? Will I ever be happy again? Will I ever be sad? But it was just that beautiful neutral point. I was just being shown what that was. But my
Yeah.
reaction to it was pretty funny because I was like, I feel like oh, wait, I know something about this, right? And this is we're having people that have gone through this before, which is quite beautiful and profound. But yeah, absolutely. And and it takes a lot of unconditional love of self before one can unconditionally love those that they maybe have judgment on, right? That's a whole
Mm,
other path and story. And I think that's why the work always starts with self and, yes, healing so that you're not in pain anymore and not fighting yourself anymore from physical first, then and the emotional, which is all, like you said, it's like untangling fishing line. All right, well, this one leads here and this one's over here and this came from there. And so whatever's showing up the most, yeah, start with that, right?
oh, for sure. It can be quite a I think at the beginning, I was speaking with somebody just yesterday, and I think they're at the very beginning of their journey. And
Mm,
and that can be a really challenging place to be in because there's so many directions to go and it can feel like there's so much. It's kind of like if you've never given any clothes away to Goodwill or something like that and you do it for the first time and you have so many clothes and you're like there's too much and it's overwhelming and I don't know what to get rid of and now I feel like scared because I had that since I was 10 and that
yeah,
is like indicative of the journey at the very beginning, right? And then when it becomes that habit, then it's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this is gonna be challenging for maybe like 25 minutes, maybe 24 hours." But then it
yeah.
gets so much easier and so much easier because it's just almost part of a routine to get through that.
Absolutely, to the point where now it's just second nature. "Oh, why do I feel this way? Where'd it come from? Oh, okay, let's clear that."
Yeah,
And
totally.
away we go.
Mhm.
Eddie's got a question. So we're all in dark and light, are we then in perpetual dusk and dawn?
That's adorable.
Right? Eddie's a lovely soul over in Australia.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I
that's
love
a good analogy.
Australians.
Yeah, it's a beautiful analogy. I've known him for quite a while. Yeah, no, and it's true. Because think about it, you're always shifting. And I always look at it like a lot of the time, as we were just speaking about the neutral point, is that quite often that can feel like it's that in between stage where you're
Mm,
just floating and you're not like reacting to something, you're just floating. And that as you go around I don't want to say clock really, but as we go through the light cycle, that in between stage is also an in between stage of consciousness. So that when you're just coming out of your sleep, so if you look at it like sleep awake cycles, very similar to the sun cycle and the setting cycle. And that in between stage, that dawn till dusk reminds me of that in between stage of consciousness where You can have a deeper, profound connection. Messages come through a little easier. I hope that answers a little bit. Would you like to add to that, V?
I mean, yeah, the first thing that came up was there is always the light and the dark, but sometimes there's so much light that there's
Yeah.
no dark, and it makes me think of the Northwest Territories when they go through their
Mm,
24/7 light periods, and it's one of the things, that's been on, I think, mine and Ocean, my partner's heart more lately in regards to there's always this seeking to get rid of the dark, and there's always this seeking to heal. And to me, those perpetual long-term light spots in Northwest Territories, for example, I'm like, that's the fun. Like that I feel like is what's missing so much from a healing perspective is forgetting to have so much fun, so much friggin' fun. I don't know what my language boundaries are on this call, but
you're good. You're good.
I'm good. Okay.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have a pretty good potty mouth some days.
Okay, sweet. And so
Yeah.
like the perpetual dusk and dawn, yeah, I mean, up and down, left and right, forward and backwards, there's a lot of different ways to definitely look at that response for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's play on the joy portion because
Sure.
I did a video this morning and it's for social around I have a dowsing rod class coming up. And so I was using StreamYard.
Mhm.
And I was just me and I had this going on and I was just doing my thing and I got every time I had thumbs up, I had 2 thumbs up, maybe 3 and then 4 and I was like, "Okay, thank you spirit." And then balloons and then hearts. And so it had me giggling so much. I'm like, "Oh, it's being done to me so I can like increase my vibration, which sends out a higher frequency as I'm doing this." I
Yeah.
totally got what was going on. But it's that reminder, if you can giggle until you're crying, like that's the best thing.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how many moms I've recommended Ali Wong to as their homework. I'm like, "Go and watch her 2nd edition." Like, I don't have kids, and I almost peed my pants, I was laughing so hard, and so I feel like that laughter is missing in a lot of people's lives, right? And it is that in itself is so healing, where you're laughing so hard, you're almost crying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll share a little thing that happened here, and I'm laughing at myself most of the time because I swear these things just happen so I can laugh and so that
Yeah.
everyone else can laugh around me. But I got my mom a foot bath and then I was making her up this little concoction for detoxing. And I thought, oh, this is a good way. And so I put in like magnesium bath salts and I just had a jar and I was making a concentration and I put in some lavender. And then I'm like, oh, I should put in some bentonite clay. And I put that in. And just as I'm about to go out the door, oh, baking soda too. Let's put some baking soda in there. And then I put the lid on. And
Oh, geez.
I turned around and the lid was going like this. And I went
Oh
to go
my
and
god.
it went all over the kitchen.
Is that the result of the bentonite clay with the baking soda? Just everywhere.
Right? But the funniest thing is that we must laugh for 15 minutes, and then cleaning it up was so easy because it had the salt, like, there was an essential oils, and it smelled good, and it cleaned off, and not use much soap. So and then I had a great story to tell my mom when I got there, and she just shakes her head at me because she knows. But those are the kinds of things that happen that, and then I'm the first one to share them out, or I took methylene blue. Do you know what methylene blue is?
It
It's
was something that was yeah, go ahead. You go
for
explain it.
the
I've heard of it.
brain. It's good for the brain. And I started taking methylene blue, and my first time taking it, I'm like, "Oh, mix it with water, do this, careful, it stains." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, it's got enough water in it." So
Everything's blue.
I take a big chunk. My entire mouth was blue, my lip and there's me laughing, and the first thing I do is pull my camera out to show her. I'm like, "Look what I did." Because it's just so funny, right? And so even us just laughing about these things now is so healthy and so good for everyone, and a
Yeah.
reminder that, yeah, it's gotta be. Here's Carolyn, she helps me with admin sometimes, and yeah, she was like, "Yeah, it was hilarious." Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. I feel and Eddie says over on Rumble, "I feel enlightened yet angry with the world, but overall I feel good." Yeah. Yeah.
Light and angry with the world. Anger is such an interesting concept. I've been reading a lot of Course in Miracles lately, and it was one
Mhm.
of those books that sat on my shelf. Someone had given it, and it sat on there forever. I had no idea what it was. And one day it was like it screamed off of my shelf. And
Yep.
I'm pretty happy to go and do courses in regards to theology. I did like a 12-week stint looking at Christian theology, and I was just fascinated and horrified and all the things all at once. And it was a really provoking experience. And so when I found the Course in Miracle on my shelf and pulled it off and started reading about anger and what anger does to the system, is
Yep.
100% separation. Like anger is a great emotion to move through for sure, you know, in a 30-second period. But longer than that, the capacity of it to create such deep separation, not only between ourself and spirit, but between other people is
Mhm.
massive, just
Yeah.
massive. And you
Yeah.
look at, like, I don't know if you've had this experience. I spend very little time in the news because of how I feel, and and just the way that it agitates my system as such a feeling person. But the amount of anger that exists so much in society right now. I mean, how does that sit for you? What do you think about that?
So I know Eddie very well, and I know what Eddie does. So Eddie, and I just want to add too that it's part of the process to me is to have that outright just kind of anger about the way the world is part of the process.
Mm,
Because once you move through that, it's easier to let it all go. It's kind of like, all right, I'm at this agitation point. Well, you can't stay in that. It's got to go at some point, right? You can't stay in it. And so you can choose, and what's the opposite of that anger, as you said? And I think it's often sadness because we're separated. It's
mm,
actually a deep sadness, but well, I'm not allowed to show that I'm sad, so I'm going to show anger instead. And I can't speak for
mm,
you, Eddie, on that. That would be my take on it, because if I didn't like something, anger is a natural response as a protection mechanism as well. At least it was for me for many years, because I just never did fit in. I was
mm.
always the outsider. And even when you go through a period in my teens, I would even and early 20s when I would try every drug. I moved to Vancouver and I was like, sure, I'll try it. Sure, I'll try it. Because I could not, every time I did anything, everyone's like, "Are you a narc?" And I'm like, "No, why?" "Well, you just seem really straight." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's because I can't take any of these and be, like, off my rocker like the rest of you. It doesn't work for me." Another sign that, "Yeah, you're not supposed to be doing this. Stop doing this."
Right, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's a fascinating experience that I like the way that you put that, it's just this agitation towards the world. I like the way that you put that.
Yeah,
And you're right. Once you're on the other side of that, things are very different on the other side of that, whether
yeah.
it's coming from a place of gratitude or wonder. For me, that shifted after my stint with cancer. You want to talk about anger. Whoo! I just about ripped the dashboard off my car one day. It was like I couldn't even stop it. And I wondered how long it had been in there, you know?
Right?
Mhm. And so on the other side of it though, oh my gosh, it's like I could kiss the trees, I could just hug the moss. It's like everything and everyone, even looking at certain people, on the sidewalk. And here I live in an area where there's a lot of transient population and a lot of drug use. And
Mm,
it's an interesting experience to look at people, not from a place of anger, but to wonder, whose baby are you? Like,
yeah,
where is your mom? And where did that separation happen?
yeah,
And you were just somebody's baby. And for me, that was one of the biggest ways of loving people on such a level that I didn't know was possible, and to look at the world kind of in the same way where it's like, what happened? What happened, and why are you still so angry about it? And where is that even coming from?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of unpacking. And it's, again, it's part of, it's like deprogramming. We have to, like, undo the programming. You have to undo your programming. You don't realize it until you're through it. And when you realize everything you were taught growing up just might not always be true. And then you have to install a new program. How do I feel? What are my beliefs? Because we've never been asked any of that. And
Mhm.
us highly sensitive, or that feeling thing, like, I knew where everyone was in any room at any time. I knew how many people are in the room, who walked out, who walked in again, because I had that capacity to, I know what's going on all around. And to drop that and to be able to let that go and just trust, right?
Right.
Because we grew up without trust, a lot of us, but we also grew up with a shitload of freedom, I think,
You
as
think
kids.
so?
Play outside and to be outside all day, right? We didn't have the tech we have now, which is really doing a number on some of the youth and the programming there. So, yeah, when you're on the other side of the anger, that's where you find the peace. And when you
That
find the peace,
yeah.
you protect that in a loving and kind way. You have
Oh, for
boundaries.
sure.
You have
Yeah.
boundaries for yourself. I won't consume that. Because it doesn't matter if you know it to be true or not, your subconscious doesn't know the difference. And so even before bed the other day, we were watching cheetahs. I'm like, oh, what a great show to watch. Cute cheetah family, right? Before bed. And then of course there was some killing in it. And then I'm lying in bed and I'm like, oh yeah, that did affect me a little bit because I could
Right?
feel it in my system. I'm like, all right, we're just gonna release this. I'm like, yeah, I can only watch the cute cuddly stuff before bed. Not the
Right?
full, this is how we kill and this is how we hunt.
Oh my god, and it's so true though, even, even down to, like, music, etcetera. This is a fascinating topic. I love this so much in regards to consumption because you can even hear it in undertones of certain music, right? Where you're like, "Oh, I gotta turn it off," like, that just makes me feel weird, and I love that even something seemingly as so innocent as a cheetah show can make it into your dreams or whatever when there's, like, a whole slaughter happening on in there, and I think that that's also something that I mean, how do you even overcome that with youth? How do you streamline that or how do you control that so much to keep them safe at such a young age where their discernment is so little at that age? How do you actually manage that so that later on in life, we don't just have people who are highly addicted to always looking outside of themselves? What do you
Right.
think?
So I've had this pointed out to me in a little bit different way, which made a heck of a lot of sense. So no matter what, like us, we have a torus field and things are always in motion and movement, and you can't stand still because it comes stagnant. So is the universe, and so is Earth at this play. And this sequence we're in right now, so to speak, or the set we're in right now, is very much about looking at reflection. So, oh, look at me doing this. This is source checking itself out, so to speak, right? It's a phase. And when one gets bored with that phase, they move on. I
Mm,
can say that for having an 18-year-old daughter, I had to let go because I was like, I can't control this. She's like, what, gonna go hide and do it from me? So I'm like, go, lawn at the table, not here. And I just made sure that we did enough. Like right now, we're going over to Salt Spring, and I'm like, yeah, it'll get her off the computer a bit more. And the more she integrates and gets that, it's that I'm in control and I'm creating my experience, the stronger it is. But I do believe that if somebody's into something, they have a choice to either find that balance or they go all in. But I do believe this phase will pass for many that choose. And that's what I had to trust with my daughter. Now, that's not everyone.
mhm,
I know a few other people that I just keep saying, this is the game. This is a real life adventure game. And so
mhm.
trying to even get people to gamify life a little bit more. I wonder what magic will show up today. Are there any special clues or hints I'm supposed to see today? So I had a bit of a bumpy day the other day, a couple days, because I'm trying to integrate something new. And when it's new and it's uncomfortable, I'm like, just get
Oh,
outside.
yeah.
My go-to is just get outside. Just get outside and move through it. We see a deer. We see 2 eagles.
Nice.
Yeah, higher perspective. Okay, thank you, right? The ocean's crashing right at Lighthouse Park, and it's really stormy. And then we went last night down to the water again just to stand in the salt water because I can't quite swim in it yet, it's too cold, but just to do a bit of a release. And then, of course, there's 2 more eagles, right? So you just, if you're willing to observe and become that observer, and so you can see things from the observer perspective because we're really not the ones talking. We're not the ones thinking. We're not the ones speaking. We're the observer of that. And so when we can choose to respond versus react, then we learn to manage our energy a bit more and can get through these things a little bit differently. Yeah. So this whole thing with just don't know if you can stop everyone. Some say it's an origin story of the Greys, and that because time is all frequency and timelines, that this is where those that choose to be implanted and plug in a bit more, go all into that as an experience. It's an experience. It's not one I would choose.
That's fascinating. I like from my understanding from the theology that I was looking at, they refer to this as you would say like evil or the enemy and for me it was blanketed really nicely into temptation. And my partner and we were giggling today and I'm not going like all like religious or anything like that, but she was talking to me today and she was talking about, well, if we just look strictly, just strictly look at the Adam and Eve story. They
Yes.
literally if this is the beginning of life and this was the beginning of everything, those two ate shit off of a tree and then took zero accountability for it. So they went and they were tempted by something and then they didn't take accountability and responsibility for it and they blamed each other. And we had a good giggle about that over coffee because I was like, oh my gosh, that's like main day society. Like we go and we choose to do things because we're tempted by it and we're like, ooh, that might feel good in a very short term period. And we forget about taking accountability before we've done it so many times. And then it becomes so habitual, that feeling that's very short term. So we want to keep choosing it and choosing it and choosing it and choosing it and forgetting the simplicity of, like you said, where it's like, this feeling has come in. I know I need to go outside immediately. Yeah. And then now there's such a huge expanse that has been gifted to me. What do I get to see and what do I get to experience? And how can my nervous system relax and regulate as a result of it? And I'm so happy that you are in the region of the world that you're in, because in these inner cities, that can be really challenging when there's so much concrete and lack of trees and lack of nature. And it really goes to show how important it is to find the opportunities to go to places where there is moving water, or even if there was just like a tiny puddle, like that would be great. But like the moving water and the winds and all of the elements to really teach us more about ourselves and where we actually need to be. Like these are these conversations. We had this conversation before we logged on where, where I'm located in the world versus where you're located and why I even moved back here. And from an environmental perspective, this would never be my first choice. Harsh environment. It's very cold, currently very windy. It's going to be really hot, really mosquito-y. Like there's a really harsh environment, but to know within yourself where you thrive is one of the greatest gifts, whether it's environmentally, like where you belong in the world. Yeah. And like ley lines go along with that, because if you've ever looked at your astrocartography, that gets even more fun then, right?
Right. And find your local ley lines that you can lie upon and recharge with. Absolutely. Yeah.
We were down in Sedona recently, and the person that we were with, we were kind of just like, how are all these monuments, they're like all lined up. Like there's these pyramids that aren't on any maps that nobody's talking about. Like that's weird. I've never thought about pyramids in Sedona. And then it lined up with all these other, famous sites that are on the maps. And then we just all in a moment, we're like, that must be one giant ley line that all of these very pivotal, like vortexes, whatever, are along. And it's amazing when you can open up and feel that and constantly go to seek it, to have whatever opening is required within you, versus staying so static inside of your home and just not seeing the world. Sometimes it blows my mind when people have never left their home city that they were born in.
Yeah. So I traveled quite young. Well, I was hell-bent to move I was in Dawson Creek at the time, which is an hour from Grand Prairie. So I was hell-bent to get and I came down to Vancouver and had a job here. So I was doing retail, buying and merchandising. And in grade 11 and 12, the only reason I finished high school is we had a pilot program for BC called entrepreneurship. And so they flew me down to Vancouver. I bought sample dresses and sold grad dresses, like one-of-a-kind grad dresses, because they were samples. And then ended up coming down and working for Kansky, which used to be downtown on Seymour, and burnt down after a week or 2 weeks after I started. But that's a whole nother story. But just to know that my environment, which led me on to move up to Whistler, which led me on to meeting these Japanese ski magazine, which led me going to Japan and then to visit my Australian roommate. And as soon as I got to Japan, I'm like, everyone needs to travel. This is ridiculous. people just don't grasp how soul nourishing, how conscious expanding that is because, oh, the way I live is not the only way.
Mm.
The way everyone around me lives is not the only way. So it depends on what your soul path, soul purpose is, but mine is definitely to have, we've talked about, right now it's around 11 that will be creative of self-sustaining properties in harmony with nature,
Wow.
gathering spaces. I don't want to call them retreats because what are you retreating from, right?
Mm.
So gathering spaces to connect and have domes on and stuff or whatever hemp houses. We haven't fully got there, but that's sort of the mission. In the meantime, continue hosting these retreats around the world, which allow us to travel and expand. But I've gone and I've set them up. Like Egypt's already set up. I've set
Mm.
the blueprint there for Egypt. I've got the house. I've got the people lined up. I know how the experience will flow for the most part, but it makes it really um, much more comfortable for attendees to know that, hey, I went there for 2 weeks by myself. I took my rods and said, where do you want me to go? What do you want
Oh
me to
my
do? Show me, guide me.
God.
Because I'm not brave. I'm like, weren't you afraid? No, not for a second was I ever once afraid. No,
Yeah.
no, even
Yeah.
when I knew they were just trying to panhandle me, I just sent them with love. They don't know any different.
Mhm.
So I look forward to that, and I've said that to a few of my guide friends there. I'm like, "You don't know any different. There's another way of being. You've just been taught this is the way you need to be." So, in some ways, creating and giving back within the communities, like for Egypt, especially with the kids putting their hands out, I'm like, here's a garbage bag. Go get me all that garbage, and then we'll give you this money. So, we're coming up with ideas and ways of them to clean up their country, but and still feel rewarded. But then I trust that once they see it clean, it'll be in such a different honor and perspective for them to honor Mother Nature, which is kind of where things are going right now. Is going back to honoring Mother Nature because we are nature, everything we eat, drink, and breathe.
Well, I mean, Mother Nature provides a heck of a lot to us. The
Yeah,
least we can do is care and have gratitude for
yeah,
what's been offered to us, right? And that can be challenging depending on how, you're raised, et cetera. And I think travel is a really good way to see that. We went to Bali and you want to talk about an Instagram versus reality,
right. I've been to Bali. I
right?
know.
Especially when you're going into some backcountry quarters, and that it's a very different story out there, and to have that perspective, though, to see what is happening in other areas of the world is so important to developing, like, the self, right? Because you only know what you know within your confine, but then, like you said, when you open that up and you go somewhere, your awareness has to follow, your consciousness has to follow, because you can't unsee it unless you really, really choose to use your energy to deny it, which is totally an
Right?
option.
Yeah, no, not happening. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it's funny because ballet, so explain ballet a little bit more because I think a lot of people, you know, it's like we're going, so this is where, okay, let's let you talk about ballet, but this is where I think that once people realize and they're on the phone all the time and they start to see how much CGI and bullshit and the truth is slowly, which is what this year's all about, whether it be online, like in Bali, it's not clean and pristine. So go ahead.
No,
Share your
you're
experience.
basically in a third world country, It's a
Right.
party place and a travel place for Australia because it's so close.
Yep.
But when you're there, all these photos that you're seeing of people in these incredible monuments or waterfalls, like, there's a 50-person line there, or there's, just outside of the frame, there's garbage all over the place, and it can be extremely heartbreaking. I mean, I know for myself, like, there was a lot of sadness that I had to move through in Bali, and Bali's one of those places that, like, when she calls, you go, and then when she tells you to leave, you get out of there. And there's a lot of opportunity for healing and awakening there. And but don't get me wrong, because the people, it's the same thing. You can really lean into the people when you get
Yes.
outside of that main, because they're trying to make their own living, right? So they got to do what they got to do. And if tourism is their hot spot, then they're gonna do what they need to do to get the money from you, and that's fine. That's what they have to be.
Yeah.
But when you get outside of that and you find the people who that's not what they're about, and you actually get to lean into their culture, et cetera. I got really sick in Bali, and the one place that we had booked, the woman came to me every morning with traditional like soups that they would use for healing. And so to be able to receive, right? To be able to receive that was it was beyond where I'm being taken care of by like a different mother in a foreign country. Like that's a whole nother level of community and connection. And I think that that's really available, hopefully, in so many different travels, right? If you're willing to just lean back and trust, which way do I go?
Yeah.
Where do I stay and where do I leave? Because so many of us will be like, well, like the price is good, even though there's like ants all over the place, but I'll stay because the price is good, as opposed to being like, get out of there. There's a sign, move, and
Yeah.
then get to the place that, really opens up. And that is really fun, but it does take so much trust.
Yeah,
So much
absolutely.
trust.
Absolutely. So when we were in Egypt, my daughter, bless her soul, this is Greece, addicted to cats. So Santorini, Greece is the same as Bali.
Okay.
Beautiful, stunning, amazing energy, especially they put the church right on the peak, which is fascinating. But if you go out there and sit there, you can see I say every little island has its own, it's a mini realm. It's its own little realm, right? And you enter the ferry and you come off the portal, or you come out of the plane, you come through a portal onto that space. But my daughter is obsessed with kittens and cats, and so we have lots of she had some ringworm going on by the time we got home, and that was a good experience for her to realize that yes, I can do this, but right, there's that balance, and she was fine, of course, but yeah, and we all got sick. I was the first to go down, which was a good thing because I was hosting, right? One of the hosts in Egypt, and my mom, Jade, and I. So it could have been plain thing. It could have been anything. We don't know. Could have been just an energetic upgrade. Who knows?
Yeah.
But to go through that, many people went through it. Yeah, and not comfortably, let's just say. Although I did find out the woman cooking was using the tap water, and I'm like, no, no, no,
Oh no.
you have used that water, please, ever again. Yeah.
Doesn't
So
work for
because
foreigners.
we're used to it, we are not. So yeah, that was the only downside. But we had a beautiful space there, and Egypt's the same. It's super dirty, right?
Yeah.
Because there's just, there's no love for the landscape per se, because it's all based on tourism. Find the more a country is based on tourism, the almost the dirtier it seems to be, even though it's a very blessed space, and Egypt has
Mm.
tons of ancient energy. And I was really activated while I was there. But I was like, by the time I went back the second time when we had the group, all I got in my head was fake, fake,
Mm.
fake, fake. I'm like, stop it. Fake, fake. And then every once in a while I'll be like, yes, that's important. And so you really start to hone in on what's important. And then I finally said, everything that's important is underground, guys. Everything is underground. That's
Mm.
that's important. And so you watch these discoveries happening, and now they're starting to go down more. We were even at the Sphinx, and we ended up remote viewing because you can't go in the Sphinx. You can only go around it, right?
Okay.
There was one little cage door, right? And so, yeah, it's fascinating how much that's cultivated to the point where the people don't even really know. So,
There's a lot, I think, that isn't really known, and I wanted to actually even say something to your whoever that cross 506, whoever that is. Like,
yes,
you have to remember too that traveling, you don't have to go to Egypt. That doesn't have to be your destination. I just drove through a town I'd never been through in southern Alberta here. I was just on my way home, and it was such an experience. It's called Pincher Creek. And I never knew that it was one of the wind capitals. It's a tiny town, and it looked like a painting coming in at sunset. There was windmills everywhere to take advantage of the wind that goes through there. You can have like
beautiful.
yeah, it was amazing. And so it's like you don't actually have to go far. And all I spent there was like $100 to stay the night. But what I got to see was something that will always forever stay in my mind. And so those traveling like that, and to be able to just even go to a neighboring city that you've never heard of, or to a restaurant across the city that you've always wanted to try but you've never thought of before, and those can even grow you in different ways, and you can bump into completely different cultures that are on the other side of the city that you've maybe never even met before. right? So
Beautiful.
I just
Yes.
want to mention that too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, that's Carolyn. Perfect and beautiful. So, and I always say, I always call that, are you creating your life or are you consuming your life? Are you doing
Mm,
something new? Are you stepping out to allow, like, I'll drive a longer way just so I can do see something different, right? Versus the same routine. And it's quite often said too that, you go somewhere and you have a meal and it's like, oh, that was so good because that was your first experience. And then you go back and you have the same thing. It's never quite the same.
right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's that even being creative with your cooking and trying something new. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Oh,
wanted to take us back for a moment. You were talking about the inner city with the kids and not having the nature there, and definitely parks and hug a tree and have a house plant, have your own little mini fountain in there. And then I was gonna also suggest that one can your body does not know the difference. So you could watch a show about somewhere else and see visually your mind, your subconscious doesn't know if it's reality, your imagination, or a movie. And that's why we get so emotional often when we watch movies, is because they greatly affect us. So I would say to those kids, it'd be really cool to create a game. There's something called Flyover Canada in Vancouver. Have you ever been there?
you know what? It's really good.
Yeah, so something like that as a more regular, because it just gets them, like, expanded. You have to expand being at one of those. Or watching, like, we watch a lot of nature shows with all the amazing little critters and creatures where I'm like, wow, like, how come this cute little crab, he's got one blue claw and he's got one big orange claw? We ran around for a week doing this. Because it's just you're like a little kid playing, like, and mimicking something you watched. So what can we do to expand that in new ways? So that's what I'd say about the inner city kids is sit your kids down and show them something different.
Mhm.
Don't watch the programming. Skip the programming. Get into something that's more nature-based, that fires you up and lights you up. If you're thinking about traveling somewhere, it's a really good way to, "Oh, let's go look it up." And we're going to Japan again. I'm like, "Oh, we got some research to do this time," because it's been years since I lived there for 3 months. And
Yeah.
then, of course, my daughter, Jade's like, I swear she's timeline Japanese is like, she's been all in it. The food, the clothing, the anime, the drawing of anime, the cats. So I didn't realize there's a cat island in Japan.
Get out, really?
There's a whole cat yeah. So I'm
Better
like,
bring the dewormer just in case.
right?
Just in case. The temptation
Absolutely.
is so strong, I just wanna hug them all.
Absolute right? And that's what happens, but cover your arms and then clean your hands. So
There you go. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hot air ballooning. Absolutely. It's actually very expansive. We do that when we're in Egypt.
Oh,
Yeah.
that sounds really cool. Yeah, I think even for me, I love throwing the TV out the window, like, just
Yes.
get rid of it.
Yes.
Movies, sure. Going to the movies is an experience in itself. To me, the more that you can intellectually stimulate your mind, whether it's something like pottery or archery or an activity, earth school, whatever it may be, if there's a way to do it in a community setting, there's so much that we can learn from each other, even if it's just looking at grass and seeing what bugs are there, or even if it's trying to learn how to use our hands to spin something on a pottery wheel. Like there's so many other things that we can do that are so outside of these computer devices. And
Yes.
and I feel really grateful that, I grew up in a time where that didn't hit me until I was in university, right? That cell phone, that stuff didn't come until quite a bit later. And so those habits or those desires were created at a young age. And I think that that's really all it is creating habits
Yeah.
daily in regards to what we want to choose and what we want to let go of. And even surrounding ourselves with the people who will fully support that, who are like,
Absolutely.
yes, like people like it's so cool to be in a group of people. My friend had hosted it was an international buffet and there was like 35 people there. And we're all in our mid to late 30s and not a single person had their phone out. Everybody just left them in the car. And so here we all are, we all baked for each other and cooked for each other. And then we spent the whole evening talking with strangers because a lot of us hadn't met before. And and I wondered, where did that shift that that's what we want to do, even though there's such a high technological society that we live in? And it's like, if you can just find the people that value the same things that you want,
Yes,
even if you don't have it yet, it's the greatest way to inundate yourself with a different level of consciousness.
absolutely. We did a we went ceramic painting for Mother's Day with my mom.
Nice.
Do you know how hard it is to paint on raised letters?
I don't actually.
Whole new appreciation. I run a painting company. I'm like, can't get a straight line. If my life depended on, I need a different brush. Like, let it go, let it go. But it was really fun and highly entertaining to go somewhere else in the city and experience something different. And yeah, so getting into that creation. I always say to people, when's the last time you went and hugged a tree or sat on a swing and just, swung? I can't get
Yeah.
on the merry-go-rounds anymore. They make me dizzy right away, but I
Yep.
can go down any slide. I can swing. I can have fun that way and explore life like a child, have that childlike wonder. I did scavenger hunt for my kid. She still asks for them sometimes if she's got
So
friends.
good.
Can you do a scavenger hunt? That wasn't hard enough, mom. I'm like, let's just say you've been practicing your entire life now, and you're gonna have to do one for me and outdo me now because we're at that space.
I love the creativity that goes into that is huge.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And playing games, if you can find some grass, like we do croquet, we do bocce ball. We do have one game we play with family that's all over. It's called Jackbox TV. And you literally, everyone has to like draw on their devices. So it's a little bit of a device. If you ever tried to draw with your finger on your phone, some pretty funny things come up. But people are around the world. It's a good way of connecting versus just sitting on a Zoom because it's harder to play that way. So it just brings out different conversations or, like you said, just heading out of town. Yeah.
Yeah,
A
well,
bit different spot.
totally. Anytime that you're in numbers with people, I think that that's where the shift is. That's where
Yeah.
the opportunity for fun is, right? Things aren't as fun when you're by yourself. At least that's my own perspective. But when you start to add people to it, oh my gosh, even like you said, people drawing all sorts of funny things on their phones. And it's just it brings so much joy and so much connection and so many ways that we can even self-regulate together or discover new things about ourselves and other people that we just didn't even know before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you mentioned you have an event coming up, maybe in Sedona?
We do have an event coming up. That's yeah, that's very good. It is coming up. It's in October,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a 4-day healing event. And I mean, when we were down in Sedona, we just fell in love with the area, and we both had really profound experiences with spirit. And I've always loved spirit, and I've always had a connection to spirit, but this was on like a whole different level. And spending so much time in church and learning about, theology, Christianity, etc., there's this huge discovery of the trauma that sits inside of religion and people who have been in religion and religious communities. And so we created this healing for people to come down to reconnect to spirit without religion. Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah.
Beautiful.
We're pretty stoked. I mean, we're gonna there's so many avenues, right? There's breath work,
Yeah.
breathing with spirit, sitting with spirit, walking with spirit, and then a lot of other group functions, generational healing with spirit, like all sorts of different things. Oh, it's gonna be so good.
Absolutely. I was
Yeah.
in Sedona. It was like, oh, it's past fall. Yeah, it was just before we went off to Egypt and Greece. But yes, there's I know the pyramid I know where you're talking about because I could see it, right? And then
Yeah.
what's with all the traffic circles? I'm like, so harnessing energy. That's all I kept getting from it was, oh, I see what's going on. So you start to see even road building as a new way, right? From a new level of experience, so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah,
Totally. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and Cross says, "Spirit is God-given, religion is man-made."
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and Eddie's saying, "Escape from the matrix is not to be idle and accept what is offered to you, accept what you can offer yourself. Freedom and bliss can be attained now. I am, we are, we can, we will."
Mm. It's
Beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, yeah, he's got some etymology of words, which has been big for some. And so when you're working with people, so tell me what's going on for you. I mean, close this in a nice way to promote what you're up to these days. So you're doing these teachings and teaching practitioners now. So
Yeah.
you're not working one-on-one anymore, but you probably have a list of people that you've trained that people could connect with.
Yeah, there's a few different ways that we offer our work. So one would be through practitioners. You can go ahead and there's a lot of
Yeah,
practitioners all over the world. I think we're in 8 different countries now. So if you just
beautiful.
search subconscious imprinting technique and a practitioner, it'll pop up. The other way that we do that is we kind of have different levels within our own company if you want to experience it. And so, I mean, like if anybody wants to experience what our work is like, we're so happy to offer access to even our membership that we have. And
Beautiful.
that's available to everybody. Am I allowed to, I'm okay to say the
Yeah,
link if you want
yeah,
it.
go ahead.
If you type in sitwithit.co/gift, you can have access 14 days to our membership. And like, I'm going to tell you a ton of healing. I do hot seat coachings in there. I do group healings in there. And then it gives you an experience to see what our work is like. If you're like, what's going on into there? What's going on in there? And then you get all of the access to what we're doing, whether it's a retreat across the world or whether it's local. We do local healings as well.
Beautiful.
Oh, nice. Look at what you did there. Technology.
Yeah, they're right. Blessing and a curse all at the same time.
Right.
Awesome. I am so grateful to have you on. And as we connected because of guests that came through, David at Vedette Lake, and David Pills is known as the Oracle. He's been around for some time doing energy work and teachings, and he carries the Star Nation pipe. So yeah, and he comes to Vedette and hosts the Sweat Lodge with us. So quite profound. So maybe at some point we can discuss you guys hosting something at Vedette.
I would love an experience out there for sure. Yeah, please keep me
Yeah,
posted.
absolutely. So stay on for a minute. We can chat after the show. But did you have any parting words you wanted to share with everyone?
One of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is learning your own discernment. Learning your own discernment and trusting yourself so deeply within it. And oh my gosh, the world will open up in a completely different way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Beautifully said. What she said. See, guys? It's Soul Tribe, I'm telling you. It just
There it
happens.
is.
Love you guys. Have a beautiful